So John McDowell's right conduct account of virtue, it's not wholly inappropriate to say it's not even to say that it's another form of moral theorizing called moral perceptualism. But as it is an account of virtue, it's also a virtue ethics theory, right? Moral perceptualism says that it is a form of moral realism that says that we actually see moral elements, that there's something that we cognize quite consciously and through perception, the same way that we see like the blueness of this water bottle, right? And that we can be more or less correct about those the same way that we can be more or less correct about something that we see at a distance. Right? Okay, so McDowell presents an argument for the right conduct account. And he summarizes his position quite succinctly early on, right? The linchpin of his position is on this idea of moral knowledge. As he says, knowledge implies that that one gets things right, right? So if we're to talk about knowing that someone has a virtuous character, or that something that they did was good even, right, like morally good, then that means that there's a right and a wrong of it. Now, this isn't right and wrong in the strictly binary sense of yes or no, right? It's more of a gradated, uh, existing on a spectrum understanding, right? Because it's a right and wrong that's informed by a baser understanding of good and bad, right? Choices. So if you're presented with two bad choices and you make the one and those are the only choices really available to you, and you make the one that's the lesser of two evils, you made the right choice. That doesn't mean you made a good choice, but it does mean you made a good choice given the situation, right, and the limitations of it. So you can see how this sort of thinking applies. Right? It's right or wrong in a more nuanced sense. To this extent, and so far as we can talk about having moral knowledge, we still need to talk about moral knowledge about our choices being right or wrong, and that's the degree to which we can do this is the degree to which we can intelligibly talk about the virtues, right? And so virtue must be conceptual in nature, right? There must be a general shared concept that we have of what it means for someone to be kind or courageous or wise, right? That there must be a generally accepted understanding of what the virtues are, right? Maybe not their order of importance, that can be individual, but that there are certain things that should be valued and certain things that should be disvalued, right? Um, and Conceptualism is basically like the philosophy of mind cognate to cognitivism, right? The idea in ethics that or the meta-ethical position, and cognitivism being that meta-ethical position that um, moral claims have a truth value. They're either true or false. Right? So there's some right answer in that regard. And true or false can be situationally based too, like contextualized too. For if the virtues aren't conceptual in nature, then there's no way we can really qualify them as knowledge in any meaningful sense, right? We can't say we know that what someone did was kind in a way that means anything. Now, this requires two further things, according to McDowell. Two things regarding virtue. One, virtue must be requires a situational sensitivity. This is functionally McDowell's own version of phronesis, right? It's something we develop over time. You don't see children really have this situational sensitivity, uh, and therefore that's why children fuck up so much, but we really don't hold them accountable for it because we know that this is something that they lack that is sort of required for moral reasoning. We expect by the time that they're, young adults or fully adults that they've developed this to a sufficient degree, barring any sort of cognitive impairments like, you know, uh, Down's syndrome or something, or like autism or something like that, like severe autism. Um, and then the second thing that virtue requires is a quasi-perceptual capacity to see the moral elements of a situation. Now it's quasi-perceptual because it's not like we literally see the rightness or the wrongness, the goodness or the badness, the way that we see, you know, um, the blueness. It's not that direct. It's more that those qualities are represented to us by our awareness, by the situational awareness, right? Our total awareness of what's going on. And these uh, quasi-perceptual aspects are what provide the reason for us to act on a certain way, to act in one way or another in a given situation. Right? Situational sensitivity informs us of the situation as a whole, and the quasi-perceptual quality basically informs us, directs us as to what the right course of action is. So it should be kind of clear at this point, but I'll make it plain just in case it isn't, that reason for McDowell isn't like explicitly thinking out, oh, that little old lady needs help crossing the street, I should help her, right? Since it's perceptual in nature, it's like seeing the blueness of the water bottle, right? It's there in the perception itself. You see all the elements, you see crosswalk counting down. You see that she's not even halfway across the street. You see that there are drivers not it's that are eager to just gun it as soon as the light turns, and so you go and help her, right? You just see all those elements and it adds up basically, right? Um, all of this in an important respect amounts to rule following, right? Which is operational. Right? It's a way of saying, and this is just a fancy way of saying that our acting on virtue, right, is acting on some general principle. Uh, in a way, right? So it doesn't. So this model of virtue ethics doesn't completely abandon the insights that the principle-based moral reasoning has. So to clarify, think about a game of chess, right? You have the rules for the game of chess, and the rules for the game of chess are very simple, and they're important, right, to playing the game of chess. But if you're playing Old Maid, the rules of chess don't apply, right? It's the same thing here. Uh, we understand sort of the moral confines and rules at play, but those don't matter unless we are observing or participating in some situation that calls for their use, right? And again, sticking with the chess metaphor, the situational sensitivity is a lot like learning to play chess. You really only need to know the very, very basic rules in order to play chess. The three basic rules are: the goal is to put the opponent's king in checkmate, right, where the king is pinned down and under threat and can't make another move. You can't move your king into checkmate, and you can't move your another piece that would move that would put your king in checkmate, if it would put your king in checkmate, right? You also have to defend the defend your king, right? If he is put in checkmate, you have to move find some way of moving him out of it, right? Those are functionally the four basic rules. And then you have the rules of movement for the pieces, right? The pawn can only move one space forward, excepting on the can only move forward in only one space, except if it's the first move for that pawn. The bishop can only move diagonally along its own color. The rook can move horizontally or vertically up and down the board, insofar as it's not blocked, only so far as it's not blocked by your own pieces, and so on and so forth, right? Now, knowing those basic rules does not give you the ability to read a chess or read the board, right? It's only experience that gives you the ability to read the board, right? Knowing the rules is equivalent to having the quasi-perceptual capacity to play chess, right? To play by those rules. Playing more and more games and getting better and better at spotting when your opponent has you in a trap, or when you're what the best move is, the optimal move is, right? And there are many, many moves open to you in a game of chess at any point in time, right? So what the optimal move is something that you only learn how to identify by being in more and more situations, right? And developing that sensitivity, right? That awareness of the lay of the pieces and how to read a chess board. But just because there's one optimal move doesn't mean that there aren't other good moves, right? Which is why we can talk about there being like a gradation of, choice. Right? You can still do the right thing, but maybe not the right thing that you did wasn't the best thing you could have done, given the situation. Right? I hope that metaphor makes sense. In the module, you'll find like links to chess puzzles, so you can actually kind of play it out and see how it works a bit more visually. So it's in this spirit that McDowell concludes that virtue and morality generally is figured occasion by occasion, where one knows what to do if one does, not by applying universal principles, but by being a certain kind of person, one who sees situations in a certain distinctive way.